Welcome to Weekly Talkback. I'm Kevin Beers,
And I'm David Witten.
and this is the show where we get to talk to Pastor Dave about his message from the previous Sunday. And this week's message was entitled To the One Who Has Everything. And the date is February 18th, 2024, in case you're keeping track. And basically, the synopsis I would give on this message was can can you have everything and still have nothing? So essentially what the entire message was about was people that have possessions that, as in the title, to the one who has everything, but do you have Jesus?
Mm-hmm.
And one of the things that you talked about in there was this destination illness
Yeah.
where
Sickness, destination sickness. Yeah.
where you have everything, you arrived at your financial goals or whatever it might be, you're living the life, and you just feel empty inside. You're just not happy with it. And then that's what you addressed with it. I thought this was a very powerful message. What was your thinking as you were getting into writing it?
Well, what I tackle whatever is presented to me from the narrative lectionary, and um, I don't know. I mean, I think that it resonates a little bit with who we are as brethren. I mean, I think brethren have always been a little bit on the more prudent side, a little frugal, a little bit careful with their spending, and lavish living is something that we were originally taught, not to do. And so, thinking about the rich young ruler, or according to Mark, the man who had possessions. Um, I just started doing a little bit of thinking and some Googling, and I came across that one message about the preacher who was teaching in Florida to a bunch of really, really wealthy people, and individual interviewing them and discovering that they really were not any happier than anyone else. In fact, a lot of them weren't happy at all. And so that really ties well to me into this passage where this ruler comes up and asks Jesus, what do I have to do to be happy? And he was a guy filled with possessions, and that's a striking condition, particularly I think in our world today, where affluence, particularly in the United States, is, we're very affluent people, but according to statistics, we're not a happy people.
Yeah, I got thinking about this, and like I was telling you before we started recording, I've been reflecting on this. I read the sermons, or you read your sermons Friday night because I'm putting together different things for the service and for Facebook and things like that. So I get extra long time to think about these things. But honestly, I've been reflecting on this ever since.
Hmm.
And what I'm reflecting on is the question that you ask in your message: can you give everything up and follow Jesus? Or
Mhm.
that's quite, I don't know if that you come out and ask the question directly, but that's how I take it.
Yeah.
Jesus were to ask me, basically sell everything, give it to the poor, and then follow me,
Hmm.
would I do it? Now, I've been in different churches where you can ask that kind of a question, and the answer that you get, because this is actually a topic that comes up quite a bit, could you do it? And of course, most Christians give the right answer of, oh, absolutely, I could do that, without really thinking about it. But if you think deeply about who you are and what you stand for, that's why I've been reflecting on for so long, because I went through a very rough period in my life where all I could do was think about money because I just didn't have any. I was close to being destitute, I guess you might say. And then clawing your way back from that, finally reaching a point where I'm comfortable enough. I'm not wealthy, but I'm comfortable. My daily needs are being met. Could I give all that up and just, like you said, go to Calcutta and live with the poor, or
Hmm.
something like that? And in all honesty, I'm not sure I can say yes to that.
Yeah. Yeah.
And that, to me, that I think that's where most people should be, or would be. I shouldn't say they should be there, but
Yeah.
they would be there if they really reflect on it. I think a lot of people, and because I know the work it took to get back to where I am,
Right. Right.
and then to, in a sense, throw it all away.
Right.
And so anyway, that's
Yeah.
what's your experience with people, in
Well,
that.
I was going to comment on your thoughts about could we do it? You know, when the man approaches Jesus and asks him, "What must I do to inherit eternal life?" That was the first question that the rich man asks him. And Jesus says, "Well, you know the Bible, follow the law of Moses, and do this, do that." And he mentioned all these things. And I think that if the rich young ruler would have said, "Yeah, I do those things, and I'm content," I don't know that Jesus would have pushed him to the next level. But he saw something in that man that here he had everything, but in essence he had nothing because he wasn't happy. He didn't find purpose and meaning in the life. At that point, I think Jesus took the next level. So I would ask the question to you, where are you at? I mean, is there some kind of nagging thing that you feel like is lacking in your life, that you feel like you need to do something? That's when Jesus is going to say, all right, give it all up, give me 100%, follow me.
Mhm. Yeah, and I don't think Jesus is asking us to do that, but what's really being questioned there is, what is your relationship with the world versus your relationship with God?
Yeah, what's your priorities?
Exactly.
Yeah.
And for me, financial security is a very important thing. I'm approaching those retirement years. I got to make sure I have enough to live on. Like, there's all these things you want to have in line, but at some point, I mean, let me go back to when I was in my mid 20s or so. I felt called to ministry, and it didn't make sense. I was making good money, and because I don't have a college degree, in order to go into as a pastor, go into ministry as a pastor, I was going to take like an 80% pay cut. And it made no sense. I was starting a family. I with the amount of money I was being paid, I wouldn't be able to afford my mortgage, like nothing. I would have nothing. But I was able to say, you know what? I don't know what the plan is, but I'm going forward. So I started on the path. I never became a pastor. That's a whole nother story. But I was willing to give it all up.
Hmm.
Now in my older years, when I look back, it's like it it's not that that was easy back then, but my circumstances have changed, and now how do I what are my priorities now? Like, I'm still following Jesus, of course, but if he asked me to give it all up, could I?
Yeah. Well, as you look back on that decision to not go into the ministry, do you have any regrets in that, or was that, if you're looking back, that was the right move for you?
No, that was the correct move, because my call was really to uncover my depression, and it initiated the entire healing process.
Okay.
So while the call was not actually for me to become a pastor, the call itself had its other purposes, but this decision was still the same. I had
Yeah.
to trust
Yeah.
that God was calling me into something better than what I had, but I had to give it all up in order to follow.
Yeah.
And
Well, when we went to Nigeria, and I mentioned this as a small illustration in the sermon on Sunday, um, it was difficult in many ways. The concern about our kids' health and education, the insecurity that we were going into. But another thing about it that was difficult was giving up the things that were comfortable and we were familiar with.
Mhm.
Furniture, our home, our car, all the little things that we couldn't take with us. I mean, we basically moved into Nigeria with two checked-in suitcases and a carry-on for each of us, and that was it. And but I want to say something about that. there was something freeing about that. It was like, I don't have to worry about these things. I don't have to worry about the paying the bills. I mean, here I was a missionary. I didn't really have bills to pay, in essence, because it was, I mean, we were there on behalf of the church. So the church took care of the basic needs, providing a house, providing a car, that sort of thing. And there was something freeing about that I had not experienced before or since.
Yeah, and I would say it was the same for me because when I decided, hey, if I have to give it all up, I have to give it all up. When I finally got to that point, it was very freeing because nothing material really mattered now. Like I can just focus on this path into ministry. And
Yeah,
I did get into ministry and it's not as a pastor, but like at our church now,
right.
the things I do, that for me is part of my ministry.
Absolutely. Right.
And I picked up a lot of education along the way because of the path I was taking. But yeah, I completely agree that it was just so freeing to, I no longer have to worry about my material possessions because
Right.
God tells me I'm going to be okay. So whatever path we're going down, it's okay.
Yeah. And I think that's the lesson in the story. I mean, I think the rich young ruler, I think Jesus saw in the rich young ruler that he was hung up on his possessions, and they I don't want to say overwhelmed him, but he put too much attention and dependency on them. And I think Jesus was saying, for your health's sake and for the benefit of the kingdom, let it go. I mean, you'll be better for it, and the rest of the world will be better for it.
Right. And that's where I think Jesus is not telling everybody to sell everything and give it to the poor. What he's saying is don't let your possessions or don't let your priorities cause you to lose your salvation.
That's right.
You
Yeah, I
know,
agree.
because you know, first of all, the best way to help the poor is not be one of them. You can't help the poor if you are poor yourself. So yes, you do need to have some sort of wealth or some kind of income generating system in
Mhm.
place, but be generous with it. Don't hoard it. Don't prioritize it over everything else. Don't make your possessions your security, which is basically that is actually the lesson for me because that security is so important to me. I cannot let my possessions be my security. God is my security. And
Well, I mean, to make a biblical point, Zacchaeus,
mhm,
the was he a tax collector? I can't
yeah,
remember
yeah,
what.
he was a tax collector.
Yeah. So anyway, at the end of his conversion, he said he was going to give up half of his possessions and pay back tenfold anyone who he had cheated.
Right.
To Jesus, that was satisfactory. Jesus didn't come back to him and say, "No, no, no, no. I told it before. I got to keep. I don't want to set precedent. You got to sell everything." He didn't do that.
Right. At the same time, it was Zacchaeus in order to give up half his possessions and then pay everybody back. That was his repentance, understanding like I really did a bad thing here, and I gotta pay restitution to everybody, plus be generous on top of that. And and when you think about the economy of the times, you were either wealthy or you were poor. So if you were wealthy, you definitely don't want to sell everything and become one of the poor because the poor did not have a good life. It was a hard life. So giving those possessions up would be a very difficult thing to do. So your microphone.
Mother Teresa gave everything up. She did identify with the poor. There's a purpose in that, so that you can identify, that you can stand in solidarity with the poor, but she did have an income source. The
Mhm.
Catholic Church, there was all kinds of money going through her to accomplish what she did. Same with Albert Schweitzer, who gave everything up and went and built a hospital in Africa. stopped being a career pianist and became a doctor and went there, uh, he had all kinds of resources that were coming in. So yes, I think there's a purpose in both sides. I think to become poor is a good thing because you are freeing yourself from those possessions and you're becoming less dependent on them. But if there's resources to help the cause of your ministry, that to me is a perfect scenario.
Well, I'll just bring this one last thing up. So, Jesus and his disciples, Judas was the treasurer for the group. They had to have money in order to have a treasurer. So they were not poor themselves. I mean, we hear about Jesus being a pauper, and no, I don't think so. Because actually, the clothing he was wearing, the reason they cast lots for it was because it was really good clothing,
Hmm,
for the time. So
hmm.
that plus having a treasurer, and then the treasurer is skimming off the top, and no one notices because there's enough money to not notice someone stealing from it. So
I've never thought about that because it doesn't say that they took offerings at the places where they went.
and Jesus had a lot of wealthy women benefactors. So, they were supported in their ministry,
Wow.
but they were not tied to, well, actually, when Jesus says feed the 5,000, they're like, that would be like a year's worth of wages to do that. They didn't say we don't have the money. They just said, you know how much money that is? They had it. So anyway, I'd just throw that in there. But the thing is, again, it comes down to, are you attached to your possessions or actually to anything? What are your priorities? Is God your top priority and everything else becomes a tool in that worship of God?
Yeah.
Or are your possessions a higher priority, or is anything a higher priority than God? And if there is, you can't serve two masters. You're going to use resources in worship of whatever that top priority is.
Amen.
Okay, so we will end it there. And if you have not heard Dave's message from Sunday, I'll link it down in the description. You can go listen to it there. Then come back here. Give us your comments. Can you reflect on this message as much as I did? Let's put it out there that way. And tell us what you think. And we'll see you next week.
Be blessed.